Hi everyone. So we will continue for the second part of cardiovascular system or through heart. So the last thing we spoke about was about the heart circulation. I hope you have read through this, like saw this video, and you have practiced the pathway of blood flow in blood. But we will continue from there. So firstly, two big veins, the largest veins that we have, superior and inferior vena cava. This is essentially same thing, but superior vena cava collects the deoxygenated blood from superior part of the body above diaphragm, and IVC or inferior vena cava carries from posterior part of the body. All of this, including coronary sinus, which is the veins of the heart itself, they all drain into right atrium, right? From, and the reason this blood is blue, because it's deoxygenated blood. From there, through tricuspid valve, it now flows to the right ventricle. From here, again through pulmonary semilunar valve opens, and then it goes to the pulmonary trunk. From here, it goes to lungs. So why it goes to lungs? To pick up oxygen. When it picks up oxygen, then that blood returns to heart, and it returns through the pulmonary veins into the left atrium over here. And the reason the blood is red, because it's oxygenated now. From here, through mitral valve, it goes to left ventricle, and then from aortic semilunar valve, it goes to aorta. From here, the whole valve and the whole oxygenated blood, the entire oxygenated blood, is now pumped into the entire part of the body. So start from this way and practice this over and over in time. There are going to be multiple questions on this particular concept. All right, this is a very important concept, as you can see. So quickly, blood being pumped off the left ventricle, where does it go? From the left ventricle, which is here, it goes to the semilunar valve, and then it goes into the aorta. So the right answer would be aorta. Which arteries carry blood to lungs? Remember pulmonary arteries, and again, this is an exception because we have spoken about this before. Pulmonary artery is the only artery that carries deoxygenated blood, because arteries carry typically oxygenated blood, right? And veins carry deoxygenated blood. So artery carry oxygenated blood, and veins always carry oxygenless blood or the deoxygenated blood, right? And the only exception here is the pulmonary artery that carries the deoxygenated blood. Okay, and so pulmonary arteries carries deoxygenated blood to lungs. Which valve exists between right atrium and right ventricle? So which is right atrium, right ventricle? Right answer is of course the tricuspid valve, and between the left ones, it's the bicuspid valve, so the mitral valve. All right, so what is the anatomical differences between the right and left ventricles? um, the right ventricles have thinner actually walls with crescent shape that wraps around the right ventricle, but the left ventricle have thicker wall than the right ventricle. And then the reason behind that, this is because, remember what the left part of the heart do. From the left part of the blood, the blood is actually pumped throughout the body, right? So there has to be some more muscle power included into this. Therefore, the left part of the left ventricle is much more thicker, because it is pumping the blood to the aorta, and it's a lot of force. It's making sure that all the oxygenated blood is going to the entire part of the body. Hence, the left part is thicker. Next part, we'll talk about the coronary arteries. We'll talk about the cardiac muscles, how does it differs from the skeletal muscle, and then we'll talk about the conduction pathway of heart, action potential, and ECG. But for now, for this lecture, we'll talk about these two only: coronary arteries of the coronary system and the cardiac muscles. All right. So what is coronary circulation? Coronary circulation is nothing but the functional blood supply to the heart muscle itself. It's a shortest circulation because it is just within the heart, so it leaves the heart and then goes into heart again. And left ventricle receives the most. So coronary circulation is two types. Firstly, coronary arteries, and then coronary veins. Like any other organs, every organ in our body is supplied with vein and artery, right? Vein for the deoxygenated blood to pick up, and artery to deliver the oxygenated blood. Same thing happens for heart also. So it has also coronary arteries. There's right and left coronary arteries that basically supplies the arterial blood to the heart. Like you can see here, it is connected to the artery, the aorta, therefore, to make sure the heart is also supplied with required amount of blood. And then there are coronary veins that supplies deoxygenated blood from the heart muscles, and that drains into this. All the coronary veins actually drains into coronary sinus, which is the meeting point of all the coronary veins. All right, so this coronary veins carries the deoxygenated blood. Two homeostatic imbalance can happen in heart. Firstly, angina pectoris, which is the thoracic pain caused by fleeting deficiency in blood delivery in the myocardium, which is the heart muscle cells. Cells are weakened here. As opposed to that, myocardial infraction or the heart attack is basically the prolonged coronary blockage. Means this coronary circulation is somehow blocked. Okay, and areas of cell death has to be repaired. Now next comes the heart muscles. So heart muscles are called as cardiac muscles, and cardiac muscles are obviously only seen in heart, not anywhere any other organ. These are striated, short, branched, fat and interconnected cells, right? So it has got one central nucleus, maybe two sometimes, but mostly it will have one central nucleus. It will be supplied with a large amount of mitochondria, 25 to 35% of the cell volume, because it requires that oxygen supply all the time. It works all the time, right? Other than that, it also has Z disc, A band, I band, T tubules, all of the characters that we see in skeletal muscle, because heart also contracts, right? But T tubules are wider though, and the sarcoplasmic reticulum is simple here, much more simpler. Another characteristic we have is called in cardiac muscles that we only see in cardiac muscle is called as intercalated disc. These are the connection junks between the cardiac cells. So for example, this is an intercalated disc, intercalated disc, intercalated disc. They actually mark the boundary of each cell, and they are filled with some form of connective tissue matrix. So in terms of the difference, first of all, skeletal muscles are longer striated and cardiac muscles are a little bit shorter, of course, and striated. There are gap junctions, and most importantly, cardiac muscles have pacemaker cells, because pacemaker is required in cardiac muscle cells. Why? Because pacemaker sets up the autorhythmicity of the heart, like heart pumps or beats all the time. So, and pacemaker sets up that, right? So it still needs calcium for its contraction process. Sarcoplasmic reticulum is there, although it is less elaborate. There are T tubules also, but fewer, and it is always supplied with aerobic. It's always supplied with aerobic supply of ATP. Okay, so more mitochondria is present. Sometimes skeletal muscle can generate ATP via anaerobic processes also, if you remember from 208, but cardiac muscle has to be supplied all the time with lots of aerobic oxygen. I mean, coming from aerobic ATP rather, not aerobic oxygen. So that's why it has way more mitochondria. The next thing we'll talk about the electrical events, or basically we'll talk about the cardiac system, which is nothing but how heart itself actually generates rhythm. And it is altered by the autonomic nervous system, not necessarily it is, of course it is connected to the central nervous system, but it is heavily regulated to autonomic nervous system. All right, and coordinated heartbeat is actually function of all those gap junctions. They're super important. And heart itself has its own intrinsic cardiac conduction system. Okay, why? Because it has got lots and lots of autorhythmic non-contractile cells. Autorhythmic means they go in a rhythm, like they beat in a rhythm all the time. And these autorhythmicity, this beating of heart all the time, generates impulse. And how is that impulse like propagates? With the help of depolarization of heart. So same thing, but this is these autorhythmicity or electrical events, these are very much specialized for heart. All right, so we'll pick up from here in the third lecture.